All right, Ben, good to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. It's good to be seen, and I appreciate you having me on today. I look forward to our conversation very much.
Yeah, it's fun. It's always fun to talk to as a former school superintendent myself. It's always fun to talk to a fellow colleague who's in it for the kids, as I say, who's not doing this to make millions of dollars. Really sees the purpose of education. So I'd love to just start, with that, and maybe with the topic of culture. And how do you think about the value of a culture within a school system in particular?
Yeah, obviously culture is very, very important. And in each of the three districts in which I've worked, it has been, real defining, and relationships have been, the key behind everything that we've done in all of the districts. And that really has built a strong culture. Have worked really hard to not only have great relationships with our staff, but our students with our staff with our staff, and ultimately our central offices with our staff and our board, with our central office cabinet team and so on. But yeah, you are exactly right. Culture is the absolute key, and it does eat everything. And the bottom line is, it's just like a schedule in a school. People have lots of conversations about, oh, are we in a 4 block? Are we in 7 period day, 6 period day? And philosophically, to me, it doesn't matter what kind of what number of periods you have. It matters what you're doing in those periods. And that's the same with culture. I mean, we all have schools, but what are we doing within those schools that are making an impact and a difference?
Yeah, you keyed on a few things I think that are could be fun to talk about. One of them that, as I heard you say there, it's less about the tactics, right? It's more about the high level. What are we actually accomplishing? It's less about how many periods, but how quality is the instruction, how intentional is the team, how much are they working together, how much are they collaborating. And I love that you almost immediately touched on this idea of relationships as a fundamental component of a strong culture. So what is it about relationships that you see as important?
Well, it's the building of trust, and with trust, and obviously there's collaboration is much stronger. The communication is stronger, and those are all intertwined. And I learned a lot about that when I was in Ionia, which is a smaller rural district near Grand Rapids, Michigan. We had a partnership with the Flippin Group, and they had a process called Capturing Kids' Hearts. And there's we could talk for hours about it, but they had a leadership blueprint. Really made a big difference, for me as a professional and as a person. And from that training, not only did I get a great friend out of it and a mentor, but we did bring back their processes into to our leadership team, and then throughout our buildings. And ultimately, it became part of our new teacher orientation on how to use their processes to really build strong relationships amongst each other and with their students. So it's always been a key for me, relationships. Even now working with the board, the whole communication piece obviously makes the relationship strong. I do some very intentional things to try to build those relationships, and it makes a difference, for sure. I've been in 3 school districts. In each of those districts, I have gone back to the Capturing Kids' Hearts process and the Flippin Group, to expose the super people within our organizations to their processes, and really try to help them understand whether or not it's something that could help build our culture to be even stronger. And it has been very well received. The team that I currently work on or work with is relatively new to me. I started this position July 20th this year, so I'm in the midst of my first year, and we do have it scheduled that my team, some of my team will be going to one of their flagship um, um, seminars, and they'll have an opportunity, and it'll be great. Like I said, it was life changing for me, and many people have similar experiences, but it brings back what's necessary to have a positive culture.
Yeah, and that ultimately it's about how do we build relationships, not just amongst our, what we think of as our team, but within the entire community, all the way to parents and students and the extended community. So how do you do that? A lot of those trainings are great. I've seen Flip and obviously high energy sorts of trainings. You come back from a conference like that or a training like that, inspired and pumped up and ready to go. And then, at least for me, within a few weeks, I've forgotten most of it, or it's not as available to me, and it's harder to bring that into an entire organization because people didn't have the same experience. They weren't there with you. So how do you think about bringing those sorts of ideas to life?
Yeah, so you bring up a good point, and part of the value of this whole process is it is a process, and it touches you personally and really evaluates who you are as a person, and that's really what gives it kind of that staying powers, because it changes you, it changes your outlook, it changes how you address individuals. And then as far as the other pieces, what has made it sustained is that there is actually some coaching pieces to it, some accountability to it, and basically learning how to engage in conversations, learning how to run meetings. So again, it's part of how you build your culture, creating your norms and so on. So when you actually have an action plan, which you come away with an action plan, that's what helps sustain it. Because you're right, it is very easy to go to a one day seminar, get very fired up, and then you're going to go save the world, and then the next week you're kind of in the same rut. One of the values that we've seen, I think I had mentioned that our team will be going. So to send an individual is nowhere near as powerful as send a team for accountability. And so that has been a strategy that has been, that I've utilized, is to have accountability partners there so we can continue to pursue the processes and the things that we feel are necessary to move our organization forward.
And I like the word accountability partners, but it means different things to different people. How do you think about it? What does it mean to you?
Well, to me, in my practice, it's been having somebody to go to talk about how things are going, the action steps that I said that I'm taking, relaying what my progress has been, and also having that person come to me and check with me, see how I'm doing, giving me some updates along the way, or listening to my updates along the way, just to keep the ideas and the strategies, on the front burner for what we're implementing.
Yeah, and to ultimately hold you accountable to do it in what we call a supportive way. We tend to think of, I think in most organizations, we think of accountability and we think of blame, or we think of, a lot of times we'll hear our clients say somebody needs to be held accountable, which is sort of code for somebody needs to be fired, right?
Right. Somebody's in trouble.
Somebody's in trouble. Exactly. Which removes, I think, the whole point and the whole value of accountability is that ultimately you can be supportive to somebody by holding them accountable. The key is to make sure it's their idea, make sure you're supporting them in something that they want to do.
Sure.
As opposed to the old model of, just do what I tell you.
Yeah, very similar to the word consequences. That typically has a negative connotation, but it certainly has positive connotations as well. But very similar. So.
And in your case, as you think about the extended community that you serve, we're kind of hopefully coming out of this pandemic. It's March 2021. I would imagine it's been a pretty tough year, especially for you as a newbie to Lake Orion there. How have you gone about building relationships with your parents, when I would imagine some of them want to be in school, some don't want to be in school, there's some in the middle. You're trying to balance this entire challenge, like being stuck between a rock and a hard place. How have you built the relationships at that level?
Yeah, it has been very, very different. I came to the district completely new. I had no relationships. I knew one person in the district. So I had the ability to make my own first impression, which is a great thing, for anybody to be able to do that. And um, as far as building the relationships and reaching out, when I first started, I had a transition plan and I had a number of key people that I wanted to meet. And we're in the middle of COVID, right? So, it's not like you can go to lunch and meet somebody or bring 10 people together in a room. So I had somewhere between 40 and 50 individual meetings with community members, some that I had identified, some that I had when I sat down with my 7 board members and had individual meetings, they identified as key players in the community and whatnot. I've got some visions around how to get community feedback on a regular basis from a select group or an identified group to help support our students. So I had those 40 to 50 individual meetings. I've also had weekly communications that we've sent out to the community, giving updates. Obviously the first one was introducing who I am and what's important to me and those types of things. But we've continued to keep that that constant communication there. They know every Friday they're going to get something from me in the district level. And then certainly all of our board meetings are broadcasted live on our cable channels, so people see that. We've also tried to maintain a Twitter presence and communicating out through videos and some different ways to communicate to families, not only in the written word, but so that they can see the tone and so that they can see the person and those types of things. As this pandemic has started to release itself a little bit, we are in an in-person schedule. So we've had our sports going for some time. We've had smaller performances and things of that nature are going. So I have been, out in doing those types of things so that I can, meet people and so on. I've also worked through a new tool that I recently came across called Thought Exchange, which gives us an opportunity to reach out to the community around one compelling question, which we did utilize just recently to help us make some decisions about how we should move forward with the amount of instructional time that we have in person for our students. And that was really powerful, and the engagement within the community was extremely high. We had nearly 3,000 people participate in that thought exchange, which was a very high number. We have about 7,000 students. And so, those are some of the things, that I've done, outside of, meeting with groups on Zoom and stuff like that. Certainly, I think we've all been doing that. I think we all have, Zoom fatigue, so to speak, by the time you're done with your day, because that's how you're meeting so often. But I also just getting out to the buildings, like I said, with us being in person, it's been good for me, being there at drop off, pick up, those types of things, seeing families, helping kids out the car, opening the doors for them, making sure they did their health screening for the day, all of those things that happen. So those are the types of things that I've been trying to do on a daily and weekly basis.
That's a lot. It's a lot of that falls in the category of communication, which is
Sure.
oftentimes the number one complaint that we hear across the country is, communication is a problem here, and it means everything, but it means nothing. It's really contextual, depends on your particular organization. And you said within that, this idea that it's not just about the words, it's about the tone, and about what I would say, or what I would call sort of who you're being, that, by you being there to receive kids in the morning, that sends a message much more powerful than any crafted sentence you could put together.
Sure.
So as you think about that, as you think about tone and who you're being, how do you think about that as it relates to leadership? What's the value of who you're being versus what you do as a leader?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it has a lot to do with the type of culture you're able to continue to have too. And so, as part of my being, I try to be very calm, for one, and really patient, and be an understanding and good listener. I certainly have my beliefs and my philosophies, but I also recognize that there are many others, on my team and my community that need to be heard and want to be heard. And oftentimes, giving them just a little bit of extra time has helped them, get things off the chest. Certainly during this pandemic, there's a lot of need for people to express their opinions, and that's oftentimes, really helpful. So as far as, it is me being present, me being approachable, me being a listener, and me being somebody that is going to help them solve whatever issue that it is, or get them to the resources that would help them solve whatever issue that it is. As a superintendent of schools, as well as a CEO and organizations, you're constantly managing conflict. And so to do that with calm and confidence is really essential. There's times that you come away from a situation and, your heart's just racing, but you just want to make sure that, those that you're, working with don't recognize that elevated, excitement, energy in a negative way. Unless of course you're trying to motivate and all those things, but you get yourself in situations and people have these conflicts, or they want to make their crisis your priority, and you just really need to try to manage that conflict to get them to the place they need to be to help solve their issue.
Yeah. I think what I hear in that is, how do you use the emotions versus the emotions using you? How do you capture the energy in a way that's productive, and a way that's thoughtful, that either invites people to participate, to talk, or to inspire others, versus having a reaction, to something that somebody said.
Yep, agreed.
You mentioned conflict, and I would imagine there's been quite a bit of it this year, especially as parents maybe have disagreed about being in person or not being in person. How do you what advice would you give to other school superintendents, or as they work through those types of conflicts?
Well, I think you have to, lead with empathy and be understanding and understand that people are coming with the best intentions. So we never can fault anybody for advocating for their children. And I think that we need to make sure that we dignify those parents that are coming to us. This pandemic has, such a divide. Either people think that this isn't real, we don't need to wear masks, or they think that they need to, be holed up in a cave somewhere, so that they don't get COVID. And there's some in between, but there really seems to be, two ends of the pendulum on this whole pandemic. So again, not getting too excited about one side or the other, and listening and trying to figure out how you can empathize and support, regardless of what end of that pendulum you're on, is really important. It's also been, something that we've had to really navigate through. Are we emphasizing that people need to get the vaccine, or are we making it available to our employees, like by providing resources, or are we telling people that they have to have it? I mean, all of those little things make a big difference in people, developing an opinion about you as a leader, and oh, they don't have the same beliefs as me, or they do have the same beliefs as me. And ultimately, you're like, every step you have to be very thoughtful, because people, especially being new in a position and coming into this, I have no equity with anybody. So everything that I'm doing is building that, that first impression, and that, those bags of equity. And, so I don't really have much to withdraw, because I haven't had a lot of deposits. So I got to be very thoughtful in the words I say, and in the actions that I do. And ultimately, I am who I am, and I do recognize that. But I also try to recognize the perspective that people are communicating me with as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's an acknowledgement of who you are is who you are, and as a leader, we don't always get to be stuck in how we are. We have to adapt to the world around us. We have to adapt to the people around us, in order to meet them where they are. And I love that idea of leading with empathy. So let's let's get real for a second here, Ben. Then what about that parent or that teacher maybe, or that community member that's just that thorn in your side? That's I know I had them that just doesn't matter what you say. They seem to be out to get you. How do you find your empathy for folks like that?
But again, I will always approach that people are coming with good intentions, and certainly I try to read through what it is they're saying rather than how they're saying it. I think, whether you get it 22 times or you get it 2 times, I think you still have to provide dignity for that person. Continue to stand that higher ground. But I do think it's essential that you continue to listen. And if they are way off base after you're done listening, I think there are times that it warrants providing additional information so that they can at least get back closer to reality. Because certainly people will come with some extreme thoughts and beliefs, and oftentimes they're way off. But giving them the opportunity to share those things, and then kind of walking back on a few of their thoughts to give them more accurate information without telling them they're wrong, it's kind of that difficult balancing act, but that is what you have to do. And the other piece is asking them like what their solutions are. And asking them some further probing questions when they provide a solution that's way out there, that organizationally and operationally doesn't work. Yeah, some follow-up, some digging deepers about, well, if we did this, that would impact my transportation department. Do you have any thoughts on where I can get 27 bus drivers by Monday? Something like, not that exaggerate, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but people that don't work in schools don't necessarily understand how everything is so complex. And it's like any other organization, but because people went to school, oftentimes they feel like they could run a school, or they know how to, do X, Y, and Z because they spend a lot of their life in a school. But they forget about, a lot of the things that we have a responsibility to, with food service, transportation, intervention programs, and all of the other pieces that are outside of the regular classroom teacher that make our organization great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always love that line too, that just because you went to school doesn't mean that you know what it means to run a school. And it's the one sort of common element that most people have, is that they did go to school, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is different than most other industries, most other jobs. That's not always the case.
So it's kind of like the old little league feeling, you get, and I was one of those dads, but you get those dads that are coaching, and we used to play baseball, so we know everything, right? And so it becomes this big thing, but it just, you see it there too. It's kind of funny, but thankfully I'm out of that little league scene now, and don't have to worry about baseball practices anymore. But
I got my youngest is starting t-ball in a few weeks, actually, so I'm sure I'll be that same parent in just very short time.
Yep.
So just a couple more questions. The time's kind of flying by here, Ben. One is, what advice do you have for aspiring superintendents, for maybe a teacher out there, or an executive member who's, wants to be a superintendent one day, or maybe is thinking about it?
Yeah, as far as advice for them, I would really encourage them to do some shadowing and really understand the position and what it is that they are, they think that they want. Every position that I've been in has been different, and I never really realized what it was until I got into it. When I was an assistant principal and I knew I wanted to be a principal, I made some efforts to, do some shadowing and fill in for principalships and whatnot. And that helped me develop that, yes, I do want to be a principal. But I recognize that pulling away from an assistant principal, I now am working more with adults as a principal. And then when I went from being a middle school principal, going to a high school principal, I then also recognized that I was working with fewer adults now. I was working with more department heads and leaders that were coming to me. And then as I went to central office, kind of the same thing. You kind of get that shorter, smaller group that you work with, and you have to be comfortable knowing that your circle is going to get smaller and smaller and tighter, and that you have the the confidence and the willingness to be able to, manage conflict, deal with people. And there are rewards, but there's a lot of different, conflicts and things that you're dealing with. And the further you go up the hierarchy, basically, the smaller your circle gets, you have a larger influence, but you're getting further and further from students, and you're getting further and further from your everyday teachers too. And people have to make sure that they're ready for that, because that is different for everyone, how they feel about, can they get away from kids, or not work with kids every single day. In this position, I still have an opportunity to, work with kids, because I get to, go to the buildings, walk the hallways, go in classrooms, read in classrooms and things like that. But that's different than me inspiring them every day. And so you just have to know that you're ready to leave one thing and do another. And I think you can do that through some intentional shadowing, really walking in the footsteps for at least a day. You can talk to people about it, but you feel it when you're in it as well.
Yeah, well, there's so many valuable leadership lessons in that too, that as you rise up through the ranks, you have to be better at leading. You have to be better at getting work done through other people, as opposed to doing the work yourself. And as your circle gets smaller and smaller, your need to influence is much more important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
great.
Well, yeah. And if I could just add to that, when I took this position as superintendent, I had 14 years in a central office position. And frankly, each of those years, I was the doer. Like, I was getting everything done. I was doing the operations curriculum and all of those different things. And so coming to this position, having a cabinet, and me having, a director of finance and operations, and a teaching and learning, and a human resource person, and saying, this is what we want to accomplish, report back to me, let me know how it's going by the end of the week. That is a different feeling than being in the weeds and getting that work done. And you have to be able to, and it really hit me after the first couple of weeks. I just, it's kind of like, geez, usually I have this long task list that I'm doing, and I got to check it off. And that's how I'm feeling my worth. And so you've got to figure that out and be comfortable with that. So it's really, you got to know who you are too, and what you can handle and let go of is really important.
It's like you're rewiring your DNA, right? It's like you're rewiring all the things you learned over the years. And the fact that you figured out in a few weeks is impressive, Ben. It took me, I was 34 when I became the school soup, and I think it took me about 2 years to figure that out. That my job was no longer to fix stuff and to do stuff. That my job was to lead and inspire and to help people be successful.
Right.
So my hat's off to you for that. So last question is, what book are you reading right now, or maybe what book is one of your favorites that you'd recommend to others read? What advice would you give on the book front?
One of the books that I really that I really like is Cage Busting Leadership. And I don't remember who the author is of it, but it was have you ever read that book?
No, I haven't. I've heard of it, but yeah, good stuff I've heard.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And it's just about thinking differently about, how you do your work, and trying to make decisions that, not making decisions just because they've always been made that way. That was really, the piece that came out of that. And it really encourages you to ask questions, like why, and those types of things. In the book, I guess that I would share with you, that Flip Flippin is co-author of, is called Your Third Story. Have you ever read that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so yeah, that's a really good one. Again, just about being a person and your development as a person, and the impact that you can have with your life and what you want to do with that. And I know I talked a lot about the Flippin group and whatnot, but they have been really important in my development. And some of one of the presenters by the name of Vern Hazard, actually, he's one that I look to as a mentor, and it really came from our first training back in 2008. We made this bond which is a whole nother hour-long conversation that we could have. But that your third story really helps you, again, focus on what's important to you as a person in life. And so yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that book.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Ben, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it. And you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. Take good care.